Hey there. This is a review for Castle Crusades campaign. This was session 81. Um, Started off with 4 players. We ended up with three that finished out the session. We had a little family hiccup, so one of the guys had to leave. But we started off. We had Sprawl, Lort, Cosmo, and Renee. Um, we picked up. I gave them 2 weeks of downtime from the battle, defending the mine, defeating the giant snapping turtle. So we started off. I kind of went around the table to see what each character had been up to. Sprawl had been spending his time brewing potions. Renee had been working on. He'd hired a contractor to come in, and he took that big turtle shell that he hauled back to Arden, and he made the top part of the shell a pavilion at his house, and then the belly of the shell he's turning into a big table. And the rest of the time he just spent lounging in his backyard. He has some sort of medieval version of a hot tub back there, and that's where he spent most of his time. Lort spent his time training with Bruin, doing some one-on-one with him because he doesn't get to do that a lot because he's often off adventuring. So, and he also spent the time walking the Humwood Forest and had a meeting with the mystical Raven sister there, Ravlunda. We didn't really go into detail on what that was about, but he was just, out there doing that. Cosmo. Cosmo spent, shockingly, his downtime relaxing and doing his bulking up phase. I say with quotation marks that you can't see, because he knew eventually the party was going to make him hit the road again, and he wanted to make sure that he had the bulk to work off while he was out there. He also spent a fair amount of time gambling. We talked about his gambling habits in Arden, where it's not really too much of a strain for him to fleece the locals for a little bit of coin. They learned a little bit about the Aldani Empire in the lore. The Aldani Empire is to the north of the setting. And then we had a moment where they were kind of going to be meeting. They wanted to meet up. Like the party had actually been kind of separate from each other, having some downtime. And Sprawl described himself as walking by Cosmo's house several times throughout this 2 weeks and never stopping in, never being ready to talk to him. He's having a big issue with Cosmo's, some internal struggle with Cosmo's change of behavior and, the mask and now the sword. Although the sword hasn't done anything that they're aware of, but the players are leery of it for sure. So he goes, they talk, and Cosmo is on his way to Scranton Hall, which is basically the inn in Arden, and for another night of gambling, some drinks, and Sprawl accompanies him. And Cosmo seems to have a little bit of change of personality in the fact that he talks about almost like he's anxious to get back on the road, which kind of surprises Sprawl and gives him a little bit of hope that his friends may be returning to his old self. So they show up at Scranton Hall. It's kind of busy. They get a table and they're having drinks and they're looking around, and Sprawl sees an old person they met a while back in the campaign. It's the paladin of Belanos, which is a fire god, named Sir Derek Callenstrand. And they'd met him in Moss Haven a while back when they lost Eudora, and they found out a bunch of the local farmers had been killed, and there was cult operation going on there. They met him briefly, and in that time, he had actually asked the party to help him on a quest. So they haven't seen him since. They kind of parted ways after that whole thing, and they Sprawl invites him over to their table, and he joins them, and he goes on to tell them that he's found out more about his quest, and his quest was to plunge this dragon tomb, and he wanted the party's help. And he tells them that he's learned that the tomb in question is once belonged to an Aldani warlord named Zoran Nath, and he is looking for, Sir Derek's looking for what is called the Horn of Draco, and it's this, supposedly this Aldani warlord used it to summon and command dragons. So he's looking for that. He asks the party again for their aid. He says the only thing he's interested in the horn. They're welcome to everything else in the tomb. But he needs their help getting there. So they agree. They don't waste a lot of time. The tomb itself is about 3 days east of Dornval in the hills of Hem, near a mountain range that borders the hills on the eastern border of the hills. So the next day they pack their gear and they head south, and we kind of breeze through the travel portion. It takes about 2 weeks mounted to get to Dornval. They make a stop over in Moss Haven. They visit with Cosmo's family, which is customary, and then they proceed on. They return to Dornval, the city of Dornval, and they find a couple things of note that are interesting that they see coming through the north gate. It leads you into the merchant district, and they notice that there's some magic shops that have popped up, like little small ones. Whether they're legit or not, nobody knows. But with the city rescinding their laws against arcane magic, they're starting to already see, like a couple months later, some businesses come in. And that was one of the things, actually, when Sir Derek was talking to Cosmo and Sprawl, is that he had been to Dornval not long after the defeat of the Broodmother and the Brood, and he found out that it was the characters that were basically responsible for that. So that kind of incited him to track them down and get their help. Like they've really proved themselves now, so he wanted them to give him a hand. They go to the Hammered Gauntlet, which is their old haunt. They're talking about, like, they've been to dragon tombs before, and Sir Derek hasn't, but he's greatly interested in their knowledge about that. And they talk about, like, they've fought like undead dragon before, and they're concerned about maybe what the type is. And I use a lot of stuff right out of, like, inspired by, like, Skyrim, which I've said before. So Sir Derek has a dragon key that will open the door to the tomb. So they ask about the key, and the key is made of jade. So think, oh, maybe it's a green dragon. So they're worried about poison. So they want to get some potions or something to protect them from poison, which isn't a bad line of thinking. They end up, because they know Lily Copperkettle, the halfling co-owner of the Hammered Gauntlet, has a secret, like, potion alchemy lab in the basement of the inn. They found it a while back. They've never talked to her about it or let her know that they know about it, but they kind of approach her. They do approach her about getting potions. They're at the end. They're also reunited with Uncle Slim, who's a fan NPC favorite of all the players and myself. I enjoy getting a chance to play him. They're just hanging out, really. Cosmo leaves, though, before Uncle Slim arrives, and he goes to Fiona's Eatery, which is in the Merchant District, and he meets with Sweeney, one of the bosses of the Shiverblade Thieves Guild. And he meets with him, and he finds Sweeney in the kitchen prepping food, which kind of surprises him, but he's into it. One of the things he notes is Sweeney's prepping food is that Sweeney is very good with knives. Like, he is very adept at, like, cutting, he's cutting food, but, like, he definitely has a skill with blades. And they meet, and Sweeney, they go to Sweeney's private booth, and Cosmo gives him a diamond that he obtained, and the party doesn't know about this. Obviously the players do, because they're sitting at the table, but they're really curious about what this is all about. And Sweeney's very impressed. He got this diamond, and he explains to Cosmo that basically because Cosmo is not an inexperienced thief, his entry into the guild is going to be a little bit different than somebody like fresh off the street that is looking to join the guild. There'll be guild fees and all that stuff. And where Cosmo's a bit more advanced, he's 9th level, they basically wanted him to perform a job to show that he could do stuff. It's more valuable to them that he has already established skill, and overpaying a fee, for membership. So that was kind of his entry membership into the Shiverblade Thieves Guild. He talks a bit. And then he returns to the Hammered Gauntlet and is reunited with his uncle. There's some good banter there. Uncle Slim has some new weighted dice that he can't wait to try out that night. And they do note that because Uncle Slim is like very good at, like, his forte is he's not like a second story man, but he's very good at running scams and like pickpocketing and stuff like that. And he does it almost subconsciously, and that's one of the things I describe while they're sitting at the table is like he's reaching out and like taking their drinks, and he's not even really thinking about it. He just does it, and they don't realize it until they go to drink and their mug's empty. So then they know it's him. But Sir Derek, who's also sitting there and is a paladin, he also catches on to this, and it very quickly shows his displeasure of Uncle Slim, and he actually goes over to the bar and talks to the owners, Lily and Bronwyn. Eventually, he's joined by some of the others, and they talk to Lily about, kind of on the sly, about getting some potions, and she says, "We'll see what we can do. I can do." But she tells them it'll take them a few days, so they're going to end up actually spending a few days in Dornball. That passed pretty quickly. One of the things that Uncle Cosmo, I think, he talked to Uncle Slim about was he wants to open a gambling den. Now, he's 9th level. He's getting to the point where he's going to start, in game terms, earning followers and stuff like that. So a gambling den's perfect for him. Cosmo actually prefers Dornball over Arden because it's a bit busier and stuff, and you can definitely make more money there. So that's something that might be in the works. Renee offers to cook a meal. He's prepping some food and stuff that will help the party deal with the elements because it's cold, it's winter. But he offers to cook a meal at the end, which Bronwyn and Lily agree to, and they throw out signs and ads. Renee just, they kind of build him up a little bit to as a big chef and to draw people in, which it does. He cooks this great meal. One of the things, though, through talking with Sir Derek, they learned something about like the history of the world, and this was kind of neat for me because this is stuff I had written about the setting a long time ago and never got a chance to present to the character. So one of the things they learned is Dragon Wars is a big thing, and how that ended was a couple ways. There's like in this area of the world. This campaign, this setting started in a 5th edition campaign, so we played 5e, and we had Dragonborn and stuff like that, and some of the players were, my son played a Dragonborn, and it was a big deal. Where they're at now, those races don't exist. Like, they're actually considered legend, and this campaign takes place 50 years after the previous one. And what they learn is that far to the west is supposedly this island of dragon-related beings, Dragonborn, and they created this thing called the Hearthstone, and that forced during the Dragon Wars all the dragons into hibernation. But the only way that could happen was there's dragons of both chromatic and metallic called the Great Ancients, and they're these just unbelievably old dragons, not quite godlike beings, but pretty darn close. Like, to the party, they definitely would be godlike beings, and those were locked away in this tomb. Now, the chromatic dragons volunteered to do this because they knew they had to end the Dragon War. Obviously, the metallic dragons volunteered to do this. The chromatic dragons did not. So there was a bit of a battle, and how this tomb was created was by the Titans. And the Titans also basically sacrificed themselves to make this happen. So the Great Ancients are locked away in this tomb / vault, and that allowed the Hearthstone to affect all the other dragons and put them in hibernation. Now, during the previous campaign, the Hearthstone was broken. It was the beginning of the campaign. It was actually stolen. It was safeguarded by the Dragonborn in their lands, and it was stolen. And over time in the campaign, it was actually broken. It was recovered eventually, but by then it was broken to the point where its ability to hibernate the dragons was leaking, and they started seeing dragons come back. the party has met dragons. They've met dragons in this campaign. So that's a big deal. There was also a little bit of foretelling in the previous campaign where one of the characters, or a couple of them, were in the Shadowfell, and they saw like which is basically the reverse of their world, a darker version of it. They saw a Titan fighting a massive dragon. They witnessed this battle, and that was like a recreation of a fight that took place in the world. Anyway, so they get to learn about that stuff, which everybody enjoyed, myself included. So they end up staying in Dornval for a few days, and then Lily brings them 4 protection potions versus poison. And Sir Derek, and at this point we lost one of our players, so I brought in Sir Derek. Actually visits the local chapter house of his order. Sir Derek's not from Dornval. He's actually from Carlisle, which is the capital of the country. But he visits the local chapter house here of the god Belanos. And he comes back with this young paladin named Harad that is going to join them. He's recruited to join them. So they set off. And first day traveling west, nothing happens. Pretty tame. Second day, Lork's doing his thing. He's up ahead a little bit scouting, and he notices like all these rocks are freshly like moved, but there's no tracks. Like there's snow, but there's no tracks. And he's like, well, this is weird. And all of a sudden, this rock whistles over his head, and he doesn't hit him, but he's like, oh. Then he sees like to the south. He sees basically hill giants in the distance. They're chucking rocks, and there's some sort of steading over there, and he can tell that they don't even know the party's there. They're just throwing rocks as far as they can throw them. I mean, they're hill giants. They're not over there splitting atoms or anything. So they're throwing rocks. So they understand that there's a hill giant steading there, but they choose to avoid it, and they go around it. They're like, there was some talk about going into it and taking it out. I mean, Lork loves to fight giants, but he's like, everybody was pretty much, we got to stay on task. And Cosmo is kind of like the taskmaster. Like, he doesn't want any side quests. He's like, we got to get there, get it done, get back so I can get back to relaxing. So he's pretty good at keeping the group on task at times. So they skip it. They also, one of the other things that did happen on the day 2 of the trip is they saw to the north like a wisp of smoke, not very far away, but they also chose to ignore that. They just go by, like they don't want any side quests. There was some talk of checking it out, but again, Cosmo was like, nope, we got to keep going. So, and to his credit, Sir Derek agrees with him because he wants to get to the entrance of the temple, so the tomb. So they push on. Eventually, they're not far from the base of the mountain to the east, and according to the maps that they have, they're getting close. They see a little bit of tree line. It's a pine fir forest, not a huge one, but this trail, they find a trail that kind of old trail that leads up into it. Think Skyrim if you've ever played that. So they go up and they're going through the forest, and Lork does see tracks, and they're bipedal tracks, but he's unfamiliar with what they are. So they're in this section here, and they get charged by, they're on the other side of the table, but they get basically charged by a pack of Yetis, which I'd never used in a game before, but I had some miniatures from WizKids, so we used those. And they get charged by the Yetis, and pretty quick fight. Like, the Yetis weren't super tough. I don't even know if I hit anybody. I probably hit a couple people, but they make short work of the Yetis. Once they do that, they look around a bit and find that the Yetis had some caves in the ice and stuff here in the snow, and loot their treasure. They get a little bit of monetary treasure out of them, and then they return back to the dragon door, which is right there in front of the terrain, and Sir Derek uses the Jade Dragonclaw key and opens the door. They go into this first room, they look around, and they see in the first room that there's a pool of icy cold water. And then there's a door to the left that is barred. There's double doors to the front. And then the wall to the right is broken out. And Sprawl goes and looks in that, and he sees there's actually a natural cave tunnel that goes off that way. In the far left corner of the room, there's a lever, and actually in the far right corner of the room, the close right corner of the room, there's a lever. Cosmo goes over and he pulls. He might have checked the door and stuff, the double doors, and they were locked, and with no sign of actually having like a keyhole or anything like that. So he goes over to that lever in the far left corner, pulls it down. They hear the grinding of stone, and the portal kind of opens up. I mean, the pool, like the water's only like maybe a foot deep, and it opens up, and then the water starts frothing out of it, and two water elementals emerge, and they start battling these water elementals in the close confines of this room. That was a pretty good fight. It was actually the decent toughness of water elementals. I think almost everybody took some damage. Lork actually got caught up in one of them, did a vortex whirlpool thing, and was able to catch Lork up in it for several rounds. I think 3 or 4 rounds. So he's taking a lot of damage doing that. Sprawl eventually got caught up into it, and the other one was using these big like water pseudopod, stretching out and just smacking people left and right. These water elementals are probably 12 feet tall, so they were pretty big. Eventually, the party's able to defeat them, and they close that thing so nothing else comes out. They decide at the moment that they don't want to search that. Like, they don't want to search the pool. They want nothing more to do with it. They don't want to open it up again to see if anything happens. So they leave it. They start to go over into the cave section here, and they get into this first cave, and there's like this pollen in the air, and there's these big mushroom stalks and fungus, and the room's kind of lit with blues and greens from this phosphorescent moss that grows on most of the rocks. They're looking around, and in one of the big stalks, they notice like this straight ridge line going across it horizontally, which strikes them as odd. There's not anything in nature that's completely straight. So Sprawl and Lork kind of investigate, and Sprawl's feeling it, and it feels hard. So he decides to like drive his fingers into this stalk, which he's able to do, but he only drives them in like an inch or inch and a half, and he realizes he can like kind of grab whatever this thing is. So he's like, all right, so he grabs it. I have him make a strength check, and he just rips this thing out, and it's a shield. And they scrape off all the mushroom that had basically grown over it, and they scrape all that off, and it bears the symbol of the Eldani Empire. And they're like, all right, this is weird. Like, they're starting to get freaked out about what's going on in this chamber, and they don't venture too far in. So they actually leave, and the lack of checking the pool had been haunting Lork, my son, who plays Lork. So they actually decide to search the pool, and the water's about 3 feet deep or so. He wades in, and they do find quite a bit of treasure. There's a lot of monetary coin in there, and they even found, I want to say that pool, there was like a really like expensive diamond. Above board, they got a ton of loot in this adventure. Like the dice were very kind to them, and we'll get back to that shortly. I don't remember if this was, I think it was at a later point. Yeah, I think it's at a later point. So they end up messing around with the levers more in this room, and one of them unlocks the double doors. They actually never mess with the barred doors. It unlocks those doors, and they proceed forward. They go up this way to that central room. They go into that central room, and it's very tall. It's like 60 feet high. And about 20 feet up from the floor, there's a ridge that goes along the whole circumference of the room. And on that ridge are all these dragon statues. And there's a set of double doors on the far side that are closed. They got a big dragon motif on them. And Cosmo goes up and he starts messing around with those doors, checking them for traps. And they're not trapped, they're locked, so he's picking the lock. And when he does, he hears a stone drop from behind him, and he looks up, and the party sees like all these dragon statues suddenly come to life, and they drop down into the chamber on both sides. There's 6 of them, so there's like 6 gargoyles. So the party is thrown into yet another battle. And that was a decent battle. I straight up used just regular gargoyle stats. I got a few hits. They got a bunch of attacks. They don't do a lot of damage, but just, these things add up. Like, it's like if you're taking a little bit of damage here and there, well, by the time you get to the end, you're going to be fairly chewed up. So they took a lot of damage. The water elemental fight was really tough, like a lot of damage. So they do battle there, and eventually they finish. There's no treasure or anything in this room. Cosmo gets them through that door, and they hear the sound of like rushing water, and he fires a arrow with a continual light on its tip up into the ceiling, and the ceiling's, it's this big cavern, and the ceiling's probably 100 feet above them. They don't see any monsters up there, which they're really nervous about because they've had that happen to them. But there's a bridge. I do have a habit of attacking them on bridges, so they are rightfully very suspicious. And they can't see from the beginning of the bridge. They can't see the far side. So Sprawl goes out a bit onto the bridge, and he can see like an opening, like an arched opening on the far end. And there, the bridge is over here. I can show you that a little bit. None of the braziers were on. When this room, they were in this room here, the lights came on. There's some torch lights that came on. These weren't lit, and neither was that big water elemental there. I'll get into that later. They decide not to go that way. I think probably I've used the attack on the bridge trope one too many times. They're like, nope, we don't want to go out there. This doesn't seem good. They also have had, like, again, they've had some experiences on bridges where it was really tough on them, and they didn't want to repeat that. So they come back to the decision that they're going to go through the caves, and they're in hopes that it will just lead like a tunnel over the water and they can get to where they got to go. They haven't, in play, they haven't seen this far side of the board at all. That's still covered up. And most of this is covered up like to about here, and the back is all covered. So they haven't seen any of this, and the very far end. They haven't seen any of that. It's just uncovered now for the recap. So they go back, and Lork and Cosmo lead the way. They go ahead of the party. They're going to cut through these chambers and try to find out where these lead. And I described to them about the pollen in the air is really thick, and they have to start making constitution saves. And they make them, though. They have to make 2 per chamber. This one kind of has this first one here kind of has a path that goes through the middle, but the next one is just really thick. Like, there is no path. They have to like weave their way through that to get to the end. Sprawl leads the rest of the party. Oh, I forgot something I think very important. Well, the first time they came in here and they found that shield, I think that's when they also encountered like this. They figured it out. It was basically like a person that was being absorbed into the mushrooms. He had this like stalk tether attached to his head, and it spoke to them basically saying, he's coming. That's all it said. That aided in like really freaking them out. They were all getting like aliens vibe and stuff, and they're like, we're out of here. We're going to go the other way. They end up, though, coming back this way. So they go through the first chamber. They make a couple saves. They both make their saves, so they proceed into the second chamber. They, again, both make their saves. They have to make a couple, and then they get up to I think the third chamber. Sprawl and the rest of the party are a chamber behind, leading them through. So then they start making their saves. And everybody on the first chamber, except for Sir Derek, who's pulling up the rear, fails their save. Now, one of the key things with this was Sprawl had cast silence, because they can't move silently. That group can't move silently, other than, actually, none of them can. Nope, none of them can. So they can't hear anything. So Sir Derek's in the back. He fails his save and collapses. They have no idea this has happened. So they get up to the beginning of the second chamber, and Sprawl wisely turns and looks to see if everybody's still with him, and he sees Bothild and Harad, but he doesn't see Sir Derek, and he's like, oh crap. So he hand motions that, hey, we got to go back, because then they turn around, they realize they're missing somebody. So they go back. When they go back, they have to redo their saves, and they all fail, and they just dropped like dominoes. Boom, boom, boom. Cosmo and Lork are up in the far chamber, and the far chamber still has that stuff, but it's got an open end, and they can hear the water and stuff. So the air is much more circulated, so they're fine there. But then they realize the party's not catching up to them. So they're like, oh crap. Now, this was really clever because a million sessions ago, when they went to the Underdark, Sprawl had made some of them, and I'm going to forget, it was some spell thing, it was like this mushroom, but it was like bubble of air, and it allowed them to breathe underwater. But Barry had also provided them with potions of water breathing, so they never used them. But they still had them on their character sheet, and this was genius on them. They were like, Lork's like, I'm going to use one of those and see what happens. And he does, and boom, sure enough, he's not affected. So he goes rushing back to find out what happened to everybody. And when he gets back down to this room, he's basically seeing them all, they've all been being dragged off by these tethers attached to their heads. And he starts like systematically freeing them. And as he does, like he cuts through these stalks with his sword and this like milky substance. And because, I don't know if it was because of that, it just made me think of like the blood or the fluid that was in Bishop in Aliens, the android. It was like this milky like syrup type stuff that comes out, and they see that, so they're like freaked out. They're like, this is not good. And but ultimately, Lork gets, I think Sprawl was the first guy he came across, so he saves him, gets him to come around, gets the thing off his head. And then they systematically go back and start saving everybody else and dragging them up through to the clean air version. So they get up. That was a really fun encounter. Like everybody, I think the group decision was like this section of the caves was like their favorite encounter. And this is going to go long, and I apologize for that. But it was a long session. We literally played until almost 11 o'clock at night. So. They get up here, they see this water obstacle. They're kind of bummed that it's not just a tunnel that goes over it, but they come up with a plan with ropes and stuff to get across, so I don't belabor the point. They're eventually able to cross, and they cross in this section. This section, because again, it's open air, they don't have a problem with the pollen, and they move on to here, and this tunnel leads to this section of double doors. So they go down, and Cosmo is able to pick the lock. He gets them in, and they go in. They're greeted by this guy here. He pops up in true Skyrim fashion up out of the tomb when they enter, and he pulls from his waist as they enter. Some of them enter, not all of them. Like Sprawl and Cosmo kind of hung back for a little bit. He pulls the Horn of Draco from his belt and blows it. And I had described this room as being like in this area and up, there was like a big cathedral ceiling, and they couldn't see all the way to the top of it. But the horn blows, and this thing drops down, this undead dragon, and he crashes through, and it was actually like a glass dome ceiling, and it just smashes all and comes down. So the battle's joined. The ghost or the spirit or whatever he is of Zoran Nath comes down. He's got a big sword that glows with necrotic energy, and the battle is joined. It's a tough fight. Could have been tougher if I hadn't forgotten one thing about Zoran Nath's abilities, but during the battle, the undead dragon is breathing like necrotic rot breath at him, which he did that right off the bat. It was his first attack, and it was the best attack he did pretty much the whole thing because I rolled a ton of damage. It nearly killed like Harad outright, and then it did damage to a lot of other people. Like Cosmo had moved in and was hiding, getting ready to like stalk his prey with Woe, and he but during the battle, the Zoran Nath focuses on Sir Derek. And the reason for that is because I basically used Death Knight stats for Zoran Nath, and they're right up. They say if this is a paladin in the group, they're going to focus on them. His sword above board is an unholy avenger. It's a really tough fight, and during the course of that fight, Harad is killed by the dragon and dead. Like there's well below -10. They defeat Zoran Noth first, and then they defeat the dragon, which was great. There's some debate over what to do with his sword. Sir Derek recommends not touching it. They don't want to just leave it because they don't want it to fall into the wrong hands. So they want to like prepare. They try to wrap it up, and Lork actually inadvertently touches it and gets zapped with necrotic energy. So they're a little bit more cautious. They get it wrapped up and with a lanyard on it, and they lower it into Sprawl's backpack, which is like basically a bag of holding. Lower it in there and secure it. They go into the other room over here and they find a dragon wall, which they've seen before, or at least some of them have. I think everybody's been to a dragon tomb. But it doesn't do anything. Cosmo, because he's a rogue, can decipher script. He rolls a check and he's successful. And he basically learns that like it's basically like draconic words of power. Now, Barry speaks draconic. And in the past, when Barry was present with a dragon wall, there was a reaction to it. Nothing happens here. So they kind of come to the determination that Barry must have Eldani blood and that's why the other one went active. So they don't do much with it. They do search around, and behind the dragon wall, they find a door, a small door. They take that, leads to a spiral staircase far above, and comes out to a cliff. Skyrim, very much inspired by Skyrim. On this cliff are like 2 ornate carved dragon statues, and it's nighttime. They have a beautiful commanding view of to the west over the hills, and they just stand there and kind of take that in. They're enjoying, like, hey, fresh air. We're not in the tomb anymore. This is great. And then Sir Derek, who had the Horn of Draco, he walks to the edge of the cliff, and he stands there for a second. Then he grabs the horn and blows it. And this like kind of stuns the party. And Sprawl kind of questions about it because they're not sure what's going to happen. Is this going to bring more like evil dragons? It summoned that undead dragon. They don't know, so they're really nervous about it. So he questions about it. And Sir Derek tells him, he goes, basically he felt compelled to do it, but he does not feel that compulsion anymore. And then he holds it out, and they kind of hinted that they wanted to take it from him, but he wasn't willing to give it up. But he's like, he concentrates on it, and he uses his detect evil ability, and he tells the party, he's like, I do not sense any evil from this horn. So they're like, oh, well, we'll see how this manifests. So they decide they want out of here. So they leave the tomb. They don't explore the rest of it. They don't go over the bridge. They just head back the way they came, and they're able to make it through. We didn't really belabor it. It was getting late. They camp in the Yeti cave, which is kind of gross, but it was shelter, and it was outside the tomb. While they're camping, they hear later that night the flapping of wings, and they go out, and basically in game terms, an adult brass dragon lands in the clearing. And Sir Derek walks up to the brass dragon, and it tells him that basically, you summoned me, I'm here to be of service. And the dragon tells them that her name is Rasnerasaur, and that she's here. And what was funny is the party had offered to escort Sir Derek back to Carlisle to help, if he needed protection, because they wanted to protect the Horn of Draco. And he had accepted it gratefully, like he was very thankful for the help. And the party, as soon as she said she was in service, the players were like, well, I guess he doesn't need an escort anymore. He's got a brass dragon. So they talked to her for a bit, and I don't remember how exactly, but the Unholy Avenger comes up, and she asks to see it. So they gingerly pull it out of Sprawl's backpack, and she tells them, oh, place that against the wall, the ice wall over there, and they do. And then she proceeds to use all of her dragon breath in the way I described it, and then some. Like, it actually fatigued her at the end because she kind of overdone herself, but she's able to melt it down and destroy it. And everybody thought that was pretty cool. It was a totally spur of the moment thing because when they were talking about previously about destroying that item, I was rolling in my head like what kind of side quest was I going to come up with so they could go do that. But this just happened to come to me in the moment, and I played with it. I played it out, and the group loved it. Really cool. So that was pretty much where we left off. I did miss that they looted the sarcophagus of Zoran Noth, and they found a fair amount of stuff. So loot was a big thing in this game, apparently. One of the things they found, that shield that they found, I decided was magical, and then that was actually above board, a random, like, spur of the moment thing. The shield was, I had the thing with all the people being absorbed into the stocks, but the shield thing was something different that I just came up with. And so what I did though was, because my buddy Matt plays Sprawl, he was the one that pulled it out and kept it. And he cast Detect Magic, and the shield radiated magic. They found a book that radiated magic. They found a Warhammer that radiated magic. Zoran Noth's armor was magical. Like, there was a lot of magic. So I asked Matt to roll percentile dice. I was checking the charts in the Monsters and Treasures book for the magical bonuses for weapons. So I just had him roll, and he rolled really well. So Sprawl, effectively, with the armor that he's gonna get modified, that was Zoran Noth's, and this new shield, has effectively become quite the tank. I don't know, I do know, but like he's quite the tank now, which is great. Good for them. They earned it. It was a really tough fight. The book Lork took, and that was a book. It's basically going to boost his con. I rolled that randomly when I was rolling up treasure, and I rolled the value amount too. So it's actually going to boost his con by like 4 points. So he will have a 19 Constitution, which is better than what he started with. He's lost Constitution because he's died, so that boosts his con up. So he was pretty happy. He'll gain like 16 hit points or whatever, so good. It just means I can throw tougher stuff at him, right? But yeah, so they got a lot of good loot. It was a good session. They got a lot of XP, and they were all happy with that. It was a great session. Can't wait for the next one, which is coming up again this month, later on, the 29th. So we'll see what happens then. But yeah, thanks for hanging in. This was a much longer episode, but it was a big episode. We started at like probably 10 o'clock or so in the morning and played with a couple breaks, but we played until damn near 11 o'clock or even closer to midnight. So big session. But hey, thanks for watching. I'll catch y'all at the next one.